Welcome to Realms Unknown, a science fiction and fantasy podcast brought to you by The Bugle. Being dead doesn't feel as bad as you'd think it would. Don't get me wrong, dying is about as bad as it gets, especially if you die the way I did, which gets you about as dead as you can be. So I don't recommend dying, particularly by the medium of medieval punishment, but it turns out that the actual feeling of feeling bad is mainly driven by glands and hormones, and once those are gone, your interest in things becomes all pretty academic. At the moment, I'm just sort of floating more or less at ceiling height, watching the man who killed me eating his dinner, and I'm not even really that pissed off about it. It's green beans and lake trout, and I can tell the trout's on the turn by how heavily the cook has spiced it. But apart from vaguely hoping he'll get the squits from it, I'm mainly looking at his bald patch and thinking he's lucky he's tall. I'd have been less scared of him if I'd known he was balding, though I guess I was right to be scared of him. He did kill me, after all. I sigh hard through what I still imagine to be my lungs, and the curtains flutter. Wait a minute, I huff again, and they go again. I can't feel a tide of excitement rising through me. It turns out that excitement's mostly glands too, but a tingling feeling of consciousness sweeps through my floaty ennui. I'm not completely out of the game. I'm still in Realms Unknown. Yeah, that's right. You've just entered Realms Unknown, a weekly speculative fiction podcast brought to you by The Bugle, in which we discuss science fiction and fantasy tropes, the newest news, our favorite old shows, books, games, and more. I'm your host, published author and comedian Alice Fraser, and my companion on this journey, the vampire Lestat to my Daniel Malloy, the Bruce Willis to my Sixth Sense, the 11th of my 13 reasons why. It is author and podcaster Nate Crowley. Welcome.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. I'm dead as well.
You're dead as well. Well, our subgenre deep dive for the day will be sort of post-mortem POVs in the ways in which science fiction and fantasy can do that story from beyond the grave. But before we get into that, a quick note on some of the news. Apparently, The Witcher 4 is getting mixed reviews. Have you watched The Witcher 4?
No.
Have you watched any of the previous Witchers?
I have. I got quite into season 2. Weirdly, didn't start with season 1. I'm thinking season 2 was the one that began with the really questionable boar man, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I had a really good time with it. It was... I think I finished that series. I have the unfortunate feeling something else crashed into it like a train, and I started watching something else and forgot to finish it. I was a moderate fan of the games. I think the books are quite good, and yeah, it was a decent adaptation. So what's going wrong with this new one?
Well, they've gotten Henry Cavill's out, and now they're replacing him with one of the subordinate Hemsworths. So it's not, I mean, obviously not the worst Hemsworth, but one of the mid-grade Hemsworths is apparently flaring his nostrils throughout, and it isn't a role that you would think would require much more than abs, but apparently by virtue of him not doing whatever it was that Henry Cavill was doing, it's disappointing the fans.
Yeah, because didn't they put out some sort of catastrophic tweet saying, please still watch The Witcher season 4, like while it was filming, and it was kind of like someone saying, I do have legitimate businesses. You know what I mean? This is the implication.
Yeah, well, I haven't watched it yet, but I saw an interview with the Hemsworth where he was saying, I'm not reading social media because it can really get in your head, and I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, we all know. Yeah, we know that feeling. Crikey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's good for his mental health overall, but
I guess see himself punching a ghost on screen, it's got to be good for anyone, really.
Yep. But before we get into the rest of the show, that brings us to what have you been putting in your brain, Nate? What's been coming in the science fiction and fantasy realm?
Oh, this is great because I've been laid low with a crippling game addiction for the last week, but it counts as science fiction because the game is RimWorld. Are you familiar with it?
Wash your mouth out with soap. Yes, no, I am. I am.
The world's most comprehensive rimming simulator. No, it's they've just had a new DLC out called Odyssey, which RimWorld, great game. It's a colony simulator, so you have people with randomly assigned traits. It's a little bit like the old school
just
Dwarf
thought
Fortress.
colony simulator. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Now my head's in that. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's a really unfortunate subgenre name, isn't it?
Sorry. Carry on.
basically, it's nice, but it gets boring after a while because you're just stuck on a map. They introduced caravans, you could go elsewhere and trade things, but now you can have full-on spaceships. So you can have a special type of tile that you put down on the floor, and you put an engine on it, say it's a spaceship, and then you can add to that and fly around. And yeah, I've been attempting to do a mobile commercial fishing plant where it basically lands, about 40 blokes rush out with fishing rods, try to empty any body of water of life, stick it in freezers, and then go off to sell it, which is an impressively specific thing to be able to do.
How's that been working for you?
It's extremely relaxing. I'm not sure what it's doing to my mind, but I'll keep going.
Wonderful. I have given up on Martha Wells's Queen Demon this week.
Yeah.
I very rarely don't finish a book, and I really loved the Murderbot series of sort of the protagonist figuring out how to be a person. And I feel like this series is sort of doing more or less the same thing. The central character is Kaisteron, who's a demon, who they possess human bodies. And I really like the world building. I really like the mechanics. But I think the way that I'm reading it in sort of bits and pieces around other, work and childcare, it's already a little bit bitsy-piecey. It has a kind of 2 time streams that are happening, but because the characters and our main group of characters don't age, I'm constantly kind of reorienting myself in time. I'm not sure if we're in the future or in the past. And then also, despite the stakes, it feels like we're sort of meandering through this, like, lushly developed world, but I'm sort of not sure why anything is happening, and I feel like it's probably my fault, but I think I've had to come to terms with the fact that unless this is a book that I would be able to enjoy if I could sit down and read it in one sitting, which is often the way I like to read a book, but is not the way that I can read this book in my current setup of being able to bring things on board. So I think I'm gonna have to put it away and come back to it later and find out if it is in fact sort of disjointed and meandering, or if the fact of me reading it in this way is chopping it up even more, and sort of defeating the function of the writing.
I think that definitely sounds like one to save for a holiday.
Yes.
Like when you're trapped somewhere with nothing else to do, that's where you find the real metal of a book like that.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like that is exactly the thing. Maybe if I'm on a bad holiday, I'll want to escape into a book like this.
Go somewhere completely shit. And yeah, and that will. Funnily enough, actually, I've been that disjointed thing. I've been finally started watching Severance recently because I was really interested in the concept for reasons we may go into later. And the problem was I kept watching it when I was really tired and falling asleep halfway through. And in a program which is about characters with patchy continuity of consciousness, that's a fucking difficult way to experience it. Because there's a real genuine sense of, have I seen this before, but from what perspective? So I think I'm going to save that and monster it all over a weekend. Because yeah, like you said, I'm pretty sure it's very well plotted, but with the lapses in consciousness, it's getting tricky.
Yeah, you need to be able to follow a very thin and winding thread. All right, well, I feel sort of vaguely absolved of my guilt for putting this book aside by your putting Severance aside. So
Let's cast them aside together.
good work, team. I'm also planning when I am at my dad's house in December for his birthday to use his Disney Plus subscription to watch Andor. So that's a plan.
Great use of your time. Yeah, excellent. Pirate that. Very good.
I'll get him to mind the children while I watch Andor, and then pretend that it's for work. And that brings us to our ad section. Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't buy. So you're sick of haunting a single graven skull for centuries? Worried about key man risk when only one mad wizard holds the password to your eternal enslavement? If you're a modern spirit trapped by an ancient spell, we're the solution. Download Soul Cloud now. For a monthly subscription, we'll upload your cursed consciousness into our distributed necromantic arrays. You'll be fragmented across multiple geographically redundant sanctums, encrypted, backed up, and accessible only by our many underpaid revenants in data centers across the continental Midwest. Monthly subscription gets you secure storage. Premium subscription gives you unlimited high-speed data use of your own brain. And Super Premium Platinum subscription gives you ad-free access to your memories, Spellbank, and memories.
Wow, can I just say I despise how believable that was? Good pitch.
You're welcome. Many of my ads are becoming about the way in which subscription services enshittify themselves and then push you up to higher ranks of subscription services until you're paying for super platinum premium just to have them not piss in your car window as you drive past.
It's wild, isn't it? Yeah.
Deeply upsetting. Are you dead? Are you tired of your bones clacking together with every step? Are you annoyed by dirt and pebbles getting into your corners and forks? You need Bone Lube. Our questionably constituted gel reduces bone-on-bone bone grind by up to 90%. Don't just shamble clinkily after your chosen prey. Glide through the night like a hideous wight. I'm boned, James Boned, and I endorse this product. Be shaken, not rattled. Bone Lube. Silence the critics and your joints.
Very fond of James Bond. I think I'll steal him.
Thank you. Just the suavest skeleton. And that brings us to Trope on a Rope. Each week we talk about a trope that we love or we hate, or we love to hate or we hate to love, but we certainly notice it every time it comes across our prow. Nate, have you got a trope on a rope for us this week?
Yeah. So I've got a 2-for-1 because I was quite negative on the first, but a bit positive on the second, and it's sort of connected. The one that really hacks me off is beings of pure energy. Picture a being of pure energy. What are you seeing?
Sort of a being. It's mainly pure, sort of light, floating.
It's boring as shit, isn't it?
It's
Like,
pretty
there's no
boring.
crab claws. There's no fancy like waistcoat. You know, can't really hold anything convincingly without looking comedy. I
Unlike
think
the being of pure crab claws, which is
not to be spoken of 3 times unless it appears, right? I think this was a more prevalent thing in the early 2000s, or when CGI was more expensive. There was a suspicious preponderance of beings of pure energy in sci-fi, and I can kind of excuse it on cost grounds. But I always think it's such you know, I mean, having written about aliens that are basically just different kinds of blokes, it's a bit pot calling the kettle black, but you know, if you interesting aliens are not balls of light.
don't know what you're talking about.
Oh no, there's a being of pure energy right behind you. I think it's not happy with me. I did wonder what was happening to the levels there.
Get out
It's
of
too angry about old CGI. The positive one, because this is another sort of cop-out approach to creature design, but it's one that integrates with my special interests, so I'll forgive it and praise it, which is just sticking like paleofauna into sci-fi stories randomly. I remember being really happy reading an Alistair Reynolds short story, which just mentioned dinosaurs pulling stuff around at a spaceport. Didn't go into anything else. Didn't, you know, it was those lovely bits of world building where it's like, I've said it, I don't need to elaborate. Work that out for yourself. There was a bit in The Scar by China Mayville, where the main character randomly fights a Dunkleosteus, which is a big armored fish from the Devonian. He didn't name it by name, but we all knew China. Or the dinosaur autists knew. And yeah, so I really like it when people just throw in, because so many great animals in prehistory, even beyond dinosaurs. And it's just a fun thing to appear in a far future setting. Makes you wonder how it got there. So yeah, beings of pure energy, bad cop out. Dinosaurs, good cop out.
I think there needs to be more Australian megafauna in sci-fi and fantasy, because Australian megafauna is like genuinely deranged. There needs to be more giant wombats. There need to be more fanged kangaroos. There need to be more tree lions. I think we just need to get like properly into drop bear territory. There needs to be more, Australian megafauna. There's not enough. Not enough.
Oh, absolutely. Megalania. That's a cracking lizard.
But why is Jurassic Park, not called Cretaceous Park, but more importantly, why are not the spin-offs just in different places with different cool dino adjacent things that you could bring back? Like, why is it always the T-Rex coming back? Like, we don't need, I mean, the T-Rex is cool, but like, have the T-Rex fight a large wombat, please.
Bloody Diprotodon, yeah, size of a rhino. Crazy.
Massive.
Yeah, but all for that. I mean, I saw the latest Jurassic Park for Rebirth. I thought it was extremely entertaining when they're mucking around with the mosasaur on the boat at the beginning. I like Gareth Edwards as well, who's the director. but it really shows that he just wanted to make a Godzilla film. Because the Jurassic Park franchise in general seems obsessed with finding things that are more exciting than dinosaurs and insisting that the public would get bored of dinosaurs, even when the public keeps spending billions of pounds to see these fucking dinosaur films. So get the message, guys. Yeah. Why create mutant and hybrid dinosaurs where you could have a diprotodont? I'm fully behind that. Or a giant platypus.
Well, it's also, they haven't quite explained the economics of it because, I mean, surely if you're working with just like the model that we have, which is the zoo, they're not like stapling penguins onto the back of iguanas to like give more excitement to the zoo goers. Like people are quite satisfied to just spend 100 Australian dollars to like hang out at Steve Irwin's family ranch.
But that said, ethics aside, I would definitely pay for tickets for a zoo that advertised, like a crocodile that was 10 times the size of a normal one and had a gum in its mouth. It'd be easier to see it than not to see it.
Yeah, true. I take it back. I take it all back. My trope on a rope for this week is makeup incompetence being a sign of authenticity in women and vice versa.
That's good.
Anyone who's too good at eyeliner must be inherently evil. And I feel like that is a trope that's been hanging around like since people put charcoal in their eyebrows for the first time. Like the idea that women who put makeup on are inherently sort of evil and tricksy and wily, despite being treated better when you have makeup on, is like, yeah, that trope. I feel like we could just have somebody put their own makeup on with competence as a skill in life and have it not reflect on their moral character one way or the other. That'd be nice.
Do you know what? That is a solid one. My 7-year-old daughter has just been getting into. Do you remember Once Upon a Time?
Yes.
Which is a show which just sort of an increasingly complex fever dream of Disney IP in a sort of a mid-budget live action setting. And your rule with makeup there applies like flawlessly to that whole series.
As flawlessly as a full coverage foundation.
That is it, yeah. If you knew nothing else about how to read human behavior, you could interpret the moral compass of that series entirely through makeup competence. So yeah, I'm stamping that one an A+.
That brings us to, speaking of A+, our subgenre deep dive for this week, which is dead point of view characters in science fiction and fantasy. Now, if this is your kind of subgenre, if you like it, every week we put out a call on the Blue Sky over at Realms Unknown on Blue Sky, and also on my Patreon, patreon.com/Alice Fraser. You can subscribe there for free. Every week the call out goes out and people cascade in with recommendations for books, comics, movies, anime, games, everything that you could possibly imagine. So if this is your subgenre, there is a reading list full of incredible recommendations by our incredible listeners, and you can also contribute over there to those lists. But we're gonna talk about dead POV characters and recommendations for that. I'm going to start off with moderately classic one, which is the Harry Dresden ghost story by Jim Butcher, in which there's a whole book where he has died and he has to solve his own murder.
I didn't get to that one in the series.
Did you give up because of the terrible politics about women?
Sure did.
You have to look past that to the rollicking good time that it is. Yes, or if you do like the vibes of it, but not necessarily the politics, I would recommend Rivers of London.
Yeah, love Aaronovitch. That's great.
And also Shawn McGuire's series, which have the same kind of wizard detective fun, but slightly better politics. Although I think Jim Butcher, to be fair, did get better at that, if not perfect, over time. The second and third of the 9th books, starting with Gideon and the 9th, but we got a recommendation in over at the Blue Sky for the short story at the end of Nona, in which 2 necromancers fight for control of one zombie as a one-act play. And if your copy doesn't include it, the publisher Tor has it online for free. So that short story, 2 necromancers fighting for control of one zombie, sounds like a lot of fun.
Funny, actually, that's is a property I so much give up on, but have to step away from because I liked it so much. And I was writing something with a dead perspective at the same time. I thought, I cannot read this book because I will just want to replicate it. So I've been saving it for when I have a project involving no undeath, and then I'm going to absolutely devour Gideon. It's it could not have been more up my street. So I think I'd give that as a recommendation to myself.
I think also a recommendation to you, who just froze up with the prospect of recommending something here. You should recommend one of your own books which deal with undeath and the protagonist undeath point of view. Perhaps you could recommend that to a reader or a listener.
You see, I was going to, but then I thought that's absolutely mercenary. So I'm glad you've given me permission to follow my basic instinct. Yeah, my first book was about a dead person. In fact, thinking about it when you asked what I'd like to talk about on this podcast, I've realized all of my books that aren't fiction or non-fiction concern characters who died either prior to the narrative or died during the narrative, or in 3 books I've written, managed to do both. So the books I'm probably best known for are the Twice Dead King series, which kind of gives it away in the title, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That was for Warhammer, and I was writing a story about a member of a species who had discarded their biological bodies 60 million years ago, had a massive war, and then decided to sleep it off for 60 million years. Only to wake up and realize that their OPSEC really wasn't as good as they thought. A lot of their empire had fallen apart. And worst of all, although they had machine bodies, they still had biological instincts, and so had to pretty much constantly not think about breathing. Otherwise, they'd fall into a panic attack. So that's that my latest work was published. My first thing that I published was a book called The Death and Life of Schneider Wrack, which was about a guy who wakes up to find he's a dead body working as forced labor on a mile-long whaling vessel where all the political prisoners from the city-state he lives in are sent to work out their undeath. So they're executed and then reanimated in a chilling parallel to my RimWorld exploits, work on a massive commercial fishery ship. I should probably examine that about myself. So yeah, I love writing dead person point of view. You can do really interesting things with memory, with ontology. Are you what makes you you? Do you think? Do you therefore are? RoboCop is, I think, the best example to talk about. So you've seen RoboCop, right?
Yes.
Does Murphy die?
Oh, big question. Does Murphy come back is the answer. I mean, if Murphy comes back, then Murphy died. But if something else comes back, then also Murphy died. So yes, Murphy died.
It's a really interesting one to think about, because that moment at the end of the film where his son sees him as RoboCop and he twirls his gun and like does a little blank robot expression to camera that's basically a smile, and he says the name's Murphy, and it's meant to be a really endearing moment because it's like, oh, his dad's still there after all that. That's still his dad. He still does the fun gun thing he did to entertain his son earlier in the film. But then if you look at it as that's a piece of software accessing the flesh-stored memories of a dead man in order to gaslight his son into thinking he's still alive, it suddenly becomes deeply bleak ending. But you can see it both ways. It's a really interesting puzzle box.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of, as you say, it's ontological. It asks us when we meet someone who we were friends with as children, whether we are still the same being or creature. If you have children, then the idea that you're the only person who remembers before they were 2, and they don't have the memory of that, but that's sort of the foundation level of their sense of self in the world, their sense of security. When I think that with my children, like, what am I doing now? What's this work that I'm doing now? It's like how they're gonna feel when they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're 21, how safe they feel is the work that I'm doing now. And they'll never attribute it to me. And they'll just be like, "I'm well balanced."
That's a lovely way to think of it, though, because you're absolutely right. Until a kid's 3, they're basically like the brittle style creatures in Blindsight by Peter Watts. They don't necessarily have sapience as we see it, but as you say, it's still all being, they're learning. There are memories being put down the way, and not they can access them. But yeah, it's really strange to think we all start off as creatures that are not conscious. And then you've got issues like, the Star Trek teleporter thing, like if all your atoms are, recreated perfectly in another place, is that you, or do you just perish and then start again? And then that gets horrible when you think about waking up every morning. Are you the same person ontologically?
Having spent the night moving those memories around, and rearranging,
Yeah.
spring cleaning, as it were. I've got a recommendation because, of course, we always have to do a Terry Pratchett recommendation. When Tom Neenan's here, he always has to recommend a Doctor Who. I'm gonna recommend, obviously, Mort, Death's Apprentice. Mort is supposed to usher a princess into the afterlife, but instead saves her, and the ways in which people around deal with somebody who ought to be dead but isn't is basically it's harder and harder for her to get people's attention because they behave as though she's not there, and they're sort of starting to act as though she were dead, except she's constantly there reminding them that she's not dead, and that again is sort of a really interesting idea of, what it is to be a person around other people. And, the other recommendation I have is, Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, who dies at some point before the events of the series.
And of course, one thing I'd like to give a shout out to, because I think it's a great bit of writing about death, is the BBC sitcom Ghosts, which, again, is one I've been able to get into with my daughter. And that's been, because she's 7, so she's starting to have a philosophical conception of death. She's known people that have died. And that show's absolutely fantastic. Not necessarily fostering a belief in ghosts. I don't think that's what it's done. But the fact it shows dead people interacting with a living person in a non-horror context and sort of looking back at their lives and, remembering things differently. I think for a show about dead people, it's a really great show about living. And I would struggle to think of anyone who wouldn't get some pleasure from it. It's very funny.
That sounds very lovely. Speaking of funny television, shows about, the post-mortem POV, The Good Place, obviously, almost a tropey version of this, where you start in the afterlife and play out different versions of these philosophies. A lot of fun, that one.
Yeah, it took me a long time to get around to that because as a kid, I had some unfortunate religious experience and was absolutely shit scared of hell. So I steered away from a lot of afterlife stuff. And it's really, really funny that was my childhood phobia. And I now pretty much exclusively write about people having a shit time after they're dead. So guess I'm working it out.
But at least in interesting ways, right? Not in the boring hellscape way.
Yeah, right. We've got that in real life now.
We get that, we can get that out of the way before we die. And of course, if you have more recommendations or you want more recommendations for post-mortem POV things, it's not always depressing. Sometimes it's hilarious. Sometimes it's depressing, but it's always interesting. Go and have a look at the recommendations over on the Blue Sky and also at my Patreon, patreon.com/Alice Fraser. That brings us to the Minds of Ooh, where we talk
Yeah.
about something that we used to love, but maybe now in retrospect feel a little bit ooh. Nate, what is your delving from your minds?
So a series I hadn't thought about in about, gosh, probably 20 years. But in my teens, I read a series of fairly pulpy post-apocalyptic novels called The Amtrak Wars. Did you ever come across that? I wouldn't expect you to have done necessarily.
No.
So this was, along with Judge Dredd's Cursed Earth arc, my sort of introduction to the post-apocalyptic genre. And it's written by a bloke from Southend in the UK, but it's about a post-nuclear Holocaust United States. And he's really obsessed with trains. A lot of description of a subterranean rail network connecting American bunkers, which is all a bit fallout, but also massive sort of land trains that just go around doing train stuff on land. But looking back to it, because I thought, oh, maybe I should reread this. And then remembered that there was a massive society of mutants based very heavily on Native Americans without actually being Native Americans. And then it introduced the Japanese in book 3. And yeah, looking back, I can't remember specifically what it said, but judging they were written at the turn of the 90s by a guy in Essex, And I remember the Yellow Rose of Texas being played many, many times on the big trains. I just don't think the vibes are great. I don't know. I don't want to go back to it.
My one is to go back to Tomorrow When the War Began by John Marsden, which was very much a young adult fiction and set in, and it's like it was so good in so many ways. It's really dark, deals with a lot of really interesting young adult themes. Before young adult was just a word for everything, but without sex. This had sex, and but was sort of well dealt with young people having their first sexual experiences. And it was set in a post-invasion Australia. Um,
Okay.
so there was an invasion of an unnamed foreign power, and these kids end up in the bush, surviving and escaping capture in a situation
Oh,
where the invaders are very clearly the people who would be invading Australia, which is to say, like, most likely Southeast Asian people, uh, Timorese or Chinese. It's not specifically named who they are, and I think that's meant to be the sort of politically correct way to do that. But actually what ends up happening is that the characters are sort of just generic Southeast Asian, which is almost worse than being
yeah,
specific.
right. Yeah. That dodges the problem only to land in a huge puddle. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like, at the time I was like, "Oh, it's very clever because they're not being racist because 'cause they're not naming the enemy, allowing us to have this kind of scenario play out." But actually it's almost worse in that way of, like, if you're doing a very specific version, like, if you're doing a Hong Kong Chinese accent, that is much less offensive than doing a Chinese accent.
Yes.
Which is in itself less offensive than doing an Asian accent. I feel like the level of specificity is is what would have rescued it from making me feel a bit, "Ugh," at the moment.
Well, yeah, because it shows at least you've done some research, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I had a friend ask me for recommendations for their 14-year-old who's a big reader, and I was thinking, "Oh, Tomorrow When the War Began," and I was like, "Oh, actually, I'm not sure." Like, I think and again, at the time, I think it was doing the job very well, and I do think things ought to be read in the context of its time. I think, John Marsden was being quite careful and thoughtful in the way that he was approaching it, but it's not the way we'd approach it now, and I'm not sure that I can recommend that a 14-year-old now engage with it with, like, an open heart, um, unless you have the conversation.
I've had exactly that exact feeling when I came back to one of my favorite books of all time, Once and Future King by T.H. White. There's been some discourse about that this year, and it made me go back to it, and there is some uncomfortably racist language in there. There's some really uncomfortable political ideas, but I think there's something quite tragic about it getting panned because T.H. White was a weird guy. Like, he did have some bad opinions, and not just of his time, but yeah, like he believed in like the civilizing power of empire, which I don't think I can really get behind in any circumstances. But on the other hand, he had a lot of what we'd call, really progressive ideas. Because he had something we see less of these days, which is a broad range of really different opinions in really different categories. He hadn't been sort of partisanized to one side of a culture war because there wasn't particularly one as we'd recognize it today at the time. So there's an awful lot of baby to be thrown out with that bathwater, and I don't think I've worked out where I stand on it yet. I think it's definitely bears a read again, and I think it'd be a really interesting experience in that context. But I mean, I love Arthurian stuff, and when I was a teen, that's what I enjoyed it for. I don't think I could have that pure enjoyment of it anymore, but I don't think it's any less of a worthwhile read, I guess.
Yeah, you sort of wanna read it when you're too young to be critical of it, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want to read something that has unpleasant or troubling ideas in it uncritically, because then you'll just, like,
Yeah, right.
bring them on wholesale. But that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Realms Unknown. If you are looking for an adventure, fine traveler, wash your mouth out and enter into RimWorld, or more specifically Odyssey, the new exploration-themed DLC where you can relax your mind by building worlds and doing all manner of things with bodies of water and fish. In terms of our dead POV character subgenre deep dive, why not dive into Nate's own books? Like the Twice Dead King series written for Warhammer, or The Death and Life of Schneider, Wrack, a novel featuring zombies and world building and possibly also fish. or for a show about dying that's a great story about living, grab your nearest offspring and watch the BBC comedy series Ghosts, where dead people live happily with alive people. Nate, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people support your work and find you online other than buying your books?
So you can find me at Frog Croakley, FROGCROAKLEY on Blue Sky. Same account on Twitter, though I can't think I'm going back there in the foreseeable. You can also find me on the Total Playtime podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, which is also an Alice helmed venture, but in this case, Alice Bell, my former colleague at Rock, Paper, Shotgun, and John Hicks. We talk about it's ostensibly a video games podcast, but I will try and make that false advertising as often as I can by talking about animals. And that's me.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. You can find me online at patreon.com/Alice Fraser. That's a one-stop shop for all of my stand-up specials, podcast, blogs. My weekly writers' meetings are there as well. I will also be running a New Year reboot between Christmas, just after Christmas and just before my birthday, that 10-day period, the gooch of the year. You do a creative reboot if you feel like you want to get into good practices and like practical habits for the new year. It was really successful last year and a lot of fun. A lot of people really enjoyed it and asked for it again. So you head over to patreon.com/Alice Fraser. You can subscribe there for zero money and get, I think it's access to all of that stuff. I will be doing the Bugle live on the 2nd of December in Brisbane. If you want to come, it'll be at the Sit Down Comedy Club in Brisbane, 2nd of December. Bugle live. Also, A Passion for Passion, my book is now available in audiobook, and delightfully for all of us, that is the one version where you can guarantee to give me money by buying a book rather than just not. So if you'd like to support me or A Passion for Passion, head over to your favorite audiobook listening and buying platform and download it there. Otherwise, this is a Bugle podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Ted Hunter. Your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'll talk to you again next week.